Hi, everybody. Welcome to our very first webinar hosted here by VELO Sports. I'm Mike Napoleon, CEO of VELO Sports, and I'm here with my good friend, Dr. Tyler Standifird, who is a professor of biomechanics at the University or Utah Valley University. Sorry, Tyler.
Yep.
Basically knows as much as anybody in the world here about speed and power creation and helps us a lot with all of the various different products and training programs that we create. So Tyler, I know we don't talk about baseball as much as we talk about some other sports sometime, but I'm kind of excited to get into the detail here a little bit on the baseball side. What have you seen as a lot of the different things that we've done in let's say golf or tennis or other sports have kind of started to translate into baseball?
Yeah, I think it's cool, right, Mike? Because you start looking at the way these rotational athletes move, the way they utilize the ground, the way they sequence things up through the core. I think growing up, you had this thought process of like playing golf would ruin your baseball swing or vice versa. And it's like, while there are some key differences, man, some of the principles of training, the principles of these movement patterns, play such a big role. And so it's fun to, I think, to take some of what we've seen work so well in golf and now kind of utilize it a lot in baseball, because I think there's some things that have been done in baseball for a long time that maybe aren't quite as founded on maybe some scientific principles that we could get a little better at.
Yeah, I think that's definitely some of the things that we're seeing. Today we're going to really talk about, the science of bat speed training and some of the other things that go into how we create bat speed and exit velo and all of those different fun elements. Just as we're getting started here from a housekeeping standpoint, you'll notice that in your Zoom pane, there is a Q&A panel. If you have any questions as we go through some of this information, please type them in there. We will either stop and answer those questions kind of as they come in, or we'll save some of those for the end. And we are absolutely thrilled to be here as long as we need to help answer all of your questions that you might have on any of these topics. So Tyler, I always, when we're looking at trying to create a new training product or program here, I'm always the big picture is what I always like to look at first. And from a baseball standpoint, what I think where we start is kind of looking at, why is bat speed even important? What does bat speed get us out, when we're out in a game? Why is this something that really is necessary? And it really boils down to one thing, and that's that bat speed's kind of the main contributor into creating exit velo. And exit velo, if we look at that, like I said, is kind of determined by a player's bat speed and then their impact ratio. And I like to look at impact ratio as, that takes a lot of variables into account, right? That takes into account where they're hitting it on the bat, how close to the sweet spot, how much energy essentially is transferring between the bat and the ball. So how do those two things, if we look at this on the science side, affect exit velo?
Yeah, I look a lot at the idea of collisions, Mike. So this concept of this transfer of momentum, this transfer of energy, which is just a combination of the mass of an object and its velocity. And what's really cool in baseball, right, is that you have the mass and velocity of the bat traveling against the mass and velocity of the baseball. And the better you're able to create that transfer of that energy, we're going to really help that impact ratio start to go up. But again, obviously, a big piece of that equation of both ends is the bat speed, right? The faster you can move that
Right.
bat, the more opportunity you have for exit velo.
And I don't necessarily think this was one of those areas that was thought about as important for a long time in baseball. Like we've found this to be kind of a newer concept. But if we know all things created equal and you're hitting the same fastball, the faster the bat's moving and the faster that player's able to make the bat move, we get exponentially more energy transferred to the ball just because the equations and the physics here, it's not like you get 1 mile an hour for every 1 mile an hour of bat speed. You end up getting a lot more, right?
Yeah, and this again comes into this transfer of energy, and we get into these kinetic energy differences where you get squared terms and half terms and all the math and science behind it.
Yeah, at the end of the day, we've kind of seen that trend in especially in professional baseball over the last 10, 15 years even that, the players that create elite level exit velo tend to have it tends to kind of go through all of their different stats. And
Yeah.
I like to call that the trickle down effect. And that basically means that every single time you make contact with a baseball, if your bat's moving 3 or 4 miles an hour faster than the next guy, that ball's got a better chance of getting through the gap, or it's got a better chance of being a line drive that gets into the gap in the out. Every little thing matters. That ground ball's going faster. That pop fly or that fly ball to the outfield could get back the whole way to the warning track or even into a home run zone. So it's not just about those players hitting more home runs. It's about every single one of those times when they make contact with a baseball of having a more positive effect on their overall statistics.
Yeah.
And you know me, I love that kind of stuff. I love statistics and dealing with that. And if we can really boil it down to like, okay, if all of these things are there and we can just take that one variable and increase the bat speed, that can be a huge benefit for all of these players in many, many different
For
areas.
sure.
Now, another area that I like to look at, and we look at a lot here at VELO, has to do with youth baseball. And now I mean, again, I think I'm a big fan of a lot of the like reduced impact ratio stuff that they do on bats now for youth players. And it's a big safety thing, right? Like, I mean, the last thing that we want are, kids getting hurt. I mean, I remember when I played baseball as a kid, like, I mean, the metal bats we used, I mean, that ball was coming off it was like a gunshot coming back at you. I pitched a lot when I was younger. And I mean, I used to remember that. Like, you had to have some pretty fast reflexes with a lot of those, especially when you get some of the bigger kids in those leagues and things like that. So, again, very positive change, I think, for the overall
For
safety
sure.
and atmosphere there for youth baseball. However, if you're reducing that impact ratio on the bat, from a performance standpoint, that's like kind of handicapping that player a little bit because now when they make contact, they're actually not going to get the same exit velo they would, with a higher impact ratio bat, which means just the opposite of the trickle down effect. That means that every ground ball you hit has a better chance of being fielded and you getting thrown out. That means less home runs. All those different things kind of work backwards. So I look at, bat speed in this area as being even more important for those players, okay? Because now they're functioning with a bat that is already reducing their exit velo. So now, you know, it's such a big deal for that kid to be able to make contact with a little bit more bat speed, in order to get the most out of their statistics and get the most out of those hits.
Yeah, when you go to that equation, right, Mike, like that is something they have control over, right? Is they have control on that bat speed as those impact ratios and some of those impact physics get controlled a little bit by rules. That bat speed, it kind of becomes the number one thing for these players at the youth level to try and get, like you said, more base hits, more home runs, more opportunities to score.
Yeah, so let's just everybody, agree to believe here that this whole exit velo thing is pretty important and that bat speed's a pretty big deal in being able to create it. And now let's really dive in a little further. Why don't we take a look at some of the things that affect exit velo? Because I think we can talk about this in a little more detailed way, and I think it'll kind of bring to light some of the reasons we do some of the things we do with our training here at VELO. The first one, which I think baseball has actually done a reasonable job with over time, and at least from a standpoint of creating powerful athletes, would be that category that we call the physical. And when we look at that, I'm basically just, sizing up the engine of the car here, right? We're not just looking at strength, but we're looking at functional mobility and range of motion and all the different things that can be categorized into the physical area of an athlete. And Tyler, I know you have a lot of experience here. I mean, how have you seen this happen in baseball, compared to some other sports? Do we tend
Yeah,
to get pretty good athletes in baseball?
yeah, like you said, I think they've done a really good job. To me, what they've done a really good job of is understand the physical of this, like, I hate to say, like, more dynamic, more just more than just a, hey, let's max out on a bench press type of thing. They've gotten into some of the rotational training. You see a lot of people doing some cool things with the med balls, and they're leveraging this understanding of the importance of that rotational component, and just trying to get things to sequence move a little bit better, right?
Yeah, and again, we can and we may at some point do an entire webinar just kind of breaking down some of the ways that we look at, physical screening, look at developing physical programs for athletes. I think it's a little beyond the scope of what we're planning to do today, but certainly a very important aspect when it comes to, a player's ability to create exit velo. The second one, which we always love to talk about, is mechanics. Again, I think on one of those teaser notes, make sure you come back for some future webinars, because I'm sure there's going to be a point where Tyler and I break this stuff down in a great degree of detail. And when we look at mechanics, and we'll talk about this a little bit later today too, we like to look at multiple things when it comes to mechanics, and very few of those things really are, based on the style of the way we see somebody swinging their bat. It's more based on how are they producing ground force? How are those forces and torques affecting the rotational sequencing of their body? And then how is that sequencing eventually getting out to their hands and arms and delivering that power through the bat to the ball? So that's kind of the big picture view of what we look at when we look at mechanics. We'll get into that in a little bit here in the future. Now, the next one, which is something that I think's become a lot more popular in baseball in the last 5 to 10 years, is this idea of what we call contact physics. And contact or impact physics essentially is everything that you can measure on a launch monitor. So if you can measure it on your Rapsodo or TrackMan or Hit Tracks or whatever you're using, those are all those things that are telling us the physics of impact, whether that's how much exit velo we have, that's how much impact ratio we have, that's spin, launch angle. All of those different factors are incredibly important to optimizing exit velo on every one of those hits. Now, this is also where you can start to really look at what bat that player is using, and is that bat optimal for that particular player as well. And this gets into a lot of other cool things that we'll talk about later today too. But, big deal there on this whole impact physics thing. I'm a fan of getting all this data. I think it's a good thing that baseball is starting to get all of this data, because I think it tells a very clear story as long as you know what you're looking at.
Yeah, and it's funny, Mike, you mentioned this being, there might be some areas, I think every sport, there's some areas where they're leading the charge, there's some where they're lagging behind. I think it's been really fun to watch this come to the forefront a little bit more in baseball, because again, obviously, yeah, you've got to find that ball as it's pitched to you and hit it. But ultimately, when you do, you want to give yourself the very best chance to transfer energy in the most effective way possible.
Yep, I agree. Now, the one that we talk about the most, Tyler, has to do with the brain. All right. So this is where a lot of our training is based in what we call neurological training. Now, what this means is that when you're doing speed training for increasing bat speed, we're not really trying to make the player stronger. We're not having, although there are positive impacts on some of the mechanical elements typically that happen out of this training, the main goal is not changing the way they're swinging the bat. It's really about accessing speed that they're already capable of producing, and the brain has sort of shut off the ability for that player to do it. And there's a lot of different reasons that can happen, and I'm sure we'll get into some of those. Behind that curtain, though, are some of the physiological aspects of why it works and why it happens. And that has to do with what we call motor units in the body. Motor units are a system of really how we move every time we step up to the plate and make a swing. Now, a simplified version of that process is this. You step into the batter's box, you get ready to make a swing. Your brain selects a motor program to make that swing with your bat. An electro signal goes from your brain down your central nervous system, arrives at your muscles, and then your muscles respond with that very detailed sequenced motion. Now, that's a big oversimplification. So, I mean, I know Tyler's a PhD guy over here. He probably wants to break it down a little bit more, but I like to keep that fairly simple, because that's what's happening. It's not muscle memory. It's not your body reacting just because it's doing it. It's your brain sending a signal to your body and then your body reacting. Now, what's interesting about this is that the motor program in your brain doesn't really change. That's actually very hard to change. You can create new ones when you're trying to make, improvements to the way you're swinging. However, the reaction, that muscular reaction can vary significantly based on a lot of factors. Energy levels of the player, how fatigued the player is, all kinds of different things can play into this. And the other one that can play into it is an expectation. So every time your brain sends that signal, it expects your body to move at a certain speed. And this is really the idea that we play on with what we call overspeed training, which is kind of the new version of the future of what used to be called overload underload training in just a more specified way, is we're trying to essentially trick your brain into expecting your body to move faster. And all the protocols that we create and all these different things are really what that kind of focuses on. Tyler, you want to add anything to that little definition there of how we're looking at that? Like I said, keeping it simple, I think, is big.
Yeah, and I think that's the key. I like the principle of this as like thinking of it as a governor, thinking of it as a way of the efficiencies of these pathways, being able to kind of help that brain deliver a little bit of a faster signal down to muscles that have a similar strength that they've had before, right? But it's going to unlock that potential to move things faster. I think it's a really good way to think about it because it keeps it simple, and then we can get into then, well, how do we do this, right? What are the right ways to make this function a little bit better, a little bit faster, a little more efficient?
Well, I think there's four kind of keys to whenever you're doing speed training for whatever sport you're doing it for. And that's that in order to really be focusing on this neurological side of the training, four big keys here. Number one, you've got to be training the entire system. So, and I think baseball does that pretty well. It's pretty rare that we're breaking down the swing into little parts in baseball, because again, you do have to be hitting a baseball that's flying at you. And so training the entire system's easy for this sport. Now, you also need to be training at maximum speed. That means that every one of the reps during this training is at maximum intensity. So if you are not pretty gassed by the end of doing, our 5 to 8 minute level 1 training protocol, you aren't doing this right. This should be a pretty intense, short burst kind of workout. Now, because of that, we don't do very high reps. There's not that many swings going on in here because if you did too many swings, you're not going to be able to maintain that maximum intensity throughout the entire process. The other thing that's cool about this training is that if you measure this before and after a single session, you're going to see immediate results in gains in speed. And then it takes some time for that to become permanent, and that's how our training cycles and all of the different planning that goes into our training happens. So if we want to give you just kind of our base definition of overspeed training, it's making your body move faster than normal during a known motion or motor pattern to reset the expected reaction speed of the motor units in your body. So again, that might sound a little sciencey, but essentially it boils down to this. If you're training speed, you got to be moving fast. If you're moving fast, you can't be using things that are heavier than your game bat or trying to move lots of weight because that's going to make you move slower. So bat speed training boils down to making your bat speed faster during the training. You've got to move fast. You've got to move fast to increase speed. Now, Tyler, when you look at studies and research and the things that you've already done here, what do you tend to see as results from this type of training?
Yeah, and Mike kind of mentioned this at the onset, right? A lot of my research is focused around, performance, speed improvements, power improvements, focusing on rotational athletes, right? A lot of what I've done is in the world of golf. But again, very similar things that we see across the board is this kind of about 6% increase in speed in these types of sessions. And this kind of appears, it's not like it's like this magic thing, Mike, but it just new data set after new data set. And this is something that just kind of keeps popping up as a number that we see in our training.
Yeah, and again, over and over again, I think with our studies, your studies, and then many others that have been done out there too. Mm-hmm. So let's look at how that actually works during one of our training protocols. So in all of our training protocols, we have kind of 3 setups that you're going to use. And this is what comes in our VELO Overspeed kit. You're going to have a base bat that's about 20% lighter than that player's game bat. You'll have a second one with a single sleeve or a green sleeve on there that's about 10% light. And when you go to that fully loaded VELO Overspeed bat with both sleeves stacked on there, you're going to see that be about 5% heavier than the game bat. Now, I know these are different percentages than many of you are used to seeing when you're talking about overload underload training. And this is a result of a lot of research that we've done on trying to optimize this training. the older school methods of this would definitely get heavier. So there would usually be a bat that was about 20% light. I think most people agreed on that 20% light bat, because if you get too much lighter than that, you really don't have to use your body very much. You just end up using your upper body and arms to make the thing go fast, and you're not getting that full training of the system. But then, a lot of times, players would use the game bat and then they'd use one that's like 20% heavy. And what we've found in, every time we've done a study on it is I've never seen a player that can make a 20% bat go faster than their normal bat speed. And for this training, that doesn't work. We want every swing, even with that bat that's 5% heavy, to be moving faster than the normal bat speed. Now, what we'll see with that is when that player's swinging the base bat alone, a lot of times we're going to see that bat speed going up by like 12 to 15%, which is a huge amount. And then when they move it up, and in every one of our protocols, we move through each one of these kind of training environments very quickly in just a handful of swings. They'll still be at 10% faster with the 10% bat. And then with the heavy one, we still generally see about 5 to 8% faster than their normal bat speed. And that just kind of goes to what the training does, right? We just went through these swings with the lighter bats, and now the body's expecting this faster movement, and we tend to get it. This is what our level 1 protocol looks like. You will notice that we do both dominant side and non-dominant side swings. So we find that to be very effective for players of all skill levels. It also is another nice additive to the training that, helps reduce injury risk and a lot of other things there on the biomechanical side. But you can notice there's not like a ton of swings going on in here. You're basically doing 3 swings, with your normal motion. Base bat, green sleeve, fully loaded, dominant and dominant. Then you go to a stride and go position. And then we always kind of max out with 3 swings just on the dominant side at the end, trying to go for some personal bests. And in the future, we're going to have all kinds of cool like digital tracking ability here, stat analysis, many, many things on the works here to come for VELO Sports over the next few years. So that's pretty exciting. Now, we have a lot of different protocols. So our protocols are all organized into what we call training cycles. This isn't the type of training that you want to start doing and then just never stop. I think that is something that can really cause issues for players in maintaining intensity, and you'll see big time plateaus happen during that type of a program. So we tend to recommend a 10-week training cycle, and we see permanency in those speed gains between about 6 and 8 weeks. And Tyler, I know you've done a number of studies on that, so you want to expand on that a little bit.
Yeah, again, it's just about getting those number of sessions to help with this neuromechanical training, neuromuscular training. And again, that kind of 18 to 20 session range was something we saw be really successful. So again, it puts us in that 6, 8, 10-ish week. Again, missing a few here and there. I think you brought up such a good point, Mike, that this is the thing that I'll shout upon the rooftops is like, this just kind of needs to be a part of everything you do from here on out. And this is why we built in these maintenance phases, especially as your players get into busy seasons, they're playing a lot of games. This is a time where we just don't shut it down for the course of 10, 12, 15 weeks. We get that one time of week of really, really good training. So much good research out there to suggest that if you're training for velocity, if you're training for speed, you just need one good session about every 7 to 10 days to maintain speeds. But if you do nothing, then you're going to blink, and at the end of your season, your bat speed has dropped 3-4 miles an hour. We want you to hang on to that through the entirety of the season, which is the purpose of these one-time-a-week maintenance phases.
Yeah, so all of this kind of works in these cycles of these 10-week primary phases where we're intense 3 days a week, day off in between. And then we can extend these maintenance phases where we reduce the frequency of the training, once a week or even twice a month is we've found to be effective. So it kind of works through this. And then as you go through those different levels of protocols, the drills require a little more coordination. They become a little bit more intense with the way you use the ground and things like that. But again, it's a very detailed system that tells you exactly what you need to do and how long you need to do it to get optimal results. Another part of that training is getting good feedback while we're going through this training. We tend to use a device called, it's made by a company called PRGR. It's a launch monitor that works for multiple different sports. Very simple device here that sits behind the player, kind of, it would be sitting where the catcher would be essentially. You make a swing in front of it, and it's going to show you how fast the bat moved. And it's going to show you how fast the bat moved, even if you're not hitting a baseball, which is a very cool thing to be able to get immediate feedback during the actual training session. Now, if you're doing soft toss or you're hitting off a tee, you can also get exit velo off of this. So, we use this kind of for two pieces: tracking progress, so you can actually get your own baseline speeds and see how you progress as you go. And then again, that immediate feedback that we're going to get actually during those actual sessions. Tyler, do you find that it's easy for people to know exactly how fast their bat's moving during the training if they don't have something like this?
Yeah, it's such a that's such a good point. I'm glad you asked me that, Mike, because to me, when it comes to overspeed training, intent is kind of the name of the game, right? You just have to make sure that if you're going to do those low reps, everyone has to be with maximum intent. I'm amazed at how many times a player will swing and be like, I'm certain that I just jumped 3 miles an hour, and they went down 4 miles an hour. And
Yeah.
then they have to really start to think and self-organize, coach themselves through that process to figure out how they create speed, and not to just mention not get lazy at the end of the training and all of a sudden your 73 quickly becomes a 65. And so, and tracking with a radar, like in fact, actually my batteries ran out of my radar for my golf overspeed, and I was in there doing it, and I literally am like, this feels almost worthless to me because I can't get that feedback.
And I think it's also very telling that when you're in actively training with a player, sometimes they think it went faster and it went down, and sometimes they feel like it was just an easier, smoother swing and it actually gets faster. So
Yep.
allowing that player to remember what those what the fast ones feel like, remembering that feel is like the absolute gold standard in them actually getting better and increasing bat speed. So really cool stuff. Now, we got a question there that says how much. All of the Velo Overspeed training systems are $199. Those are available on our website at velosports.com. The radars retail for $229, I believe, and there's some bundled discounts and things. So check that all out at our website at velosports.com if you're interested. All right. I want to get into one other thing that kind of gets into our contact physics area here, Tyler. Another thing that we have here at VELO Sports that we've done a lot with is counterweighting bats. We've done a lot of research on why all these major league players in the last, 5, 6 years have really started to get these puck knob bats in play. I think there's been a lot of cool stuff started to be talked about as far as like balance point of bats, the actual MOI of bats being looked at now as opposed to just, every 33 or 34 drop three bat created equal, which they certainly are not. We had the crazy idea to actually make a convertible puck knob that you can put on any bat to get you some of those same benefits that you have from using, these custom-made puck knob bats that the major league players are using. I thought this would be a good opportunity to just go through a little bit of this science because I think it kind of fits into that contact physics area, and I think it's really important, to understand why this stuff is happening. So if it's something you want to try out, you can really understand why you want to do it. Here's kind of the idea when it comes to a puck knob bat. So you can have these made any way that you would like. A lot of times what happens is the player likes the plate coverage they get from their current bat. They just want that bat to function like it was a slightly lighter weight bat or a slightly lighter MOI bat. And in order to do that, they need to shift the balance point a little bit. Now, the way you can do that is if you add material behind the player's hands. So behind where the player is gripping the bat, it essentially counterweights the bat slightly. So even though you've added a little bit of length to the overall bat and a little bit of weight to the overall bat, because of that shift in balance point, and I can kind of zoom in on that a little bit, because of that shift in the balance point of where the bat is, you actually can make that bat function like a slightly lighter weight bat, which can allow a number of things to happen, including one that we like a lot is that, there's going to be a little less resistance to swinging that bat, and therefore there's a potential for the player to swing it faster. Tyler, you want to get into a little bit of the nitty gritty on the physics here? I even
Yeah, again,
one of
we're
our
talking
MLA
about this.
calculators here.
Yeah, this is good, right? This is kind of the behind the scene type thing, and this is kind of a fun process, Mike, where I spent I spent a couple of afternoons at my local sporting goods store measuring bats of all different shapes and sizes. Went into with our baseball team, measured a bunch there. I was at ABCA. I measured a bunch of bats there. Basically, anyone who'd let me grab a bat, and we just kind of put it into the system to start to understand, what is its length? What's that balance point? Because all of that's going to feed into this concept of moment of inertia or resistance to angular change. And I think honestly, my easiest example of that is think of if you're trying to do some kind of flip or a spin or something like that. When my arms are out wide and they're far away from my axis of rotation, there's more resistance to that spin. Whenever you want to spin fast or you see divers, figure skaters spinning fast, mass is brought closer to the axis of rotation. And so what this puck knob does is it effectively is like bringing those arms in close, reducing that resistance to angular change. And like you said, you still get the same plate coverage, but a little bit less inertia.
Right. And so effectively what happens here is, well, you can see the numbers on the screen here. It's a complicated equation when you're calculating, rotational inertia here for the MOI of the baseball bat. But all things created equal, if you add this puck knob, and we found that there's actually a very, very specific amount of weight that puck knob needs to weigh, and a very specific amount of length it needs to add behind the player's hands. And both of those are vitally important to it working well. And they're kind of in the patent for these for these puck knobs is that kind of equation there that's really important. Because there are some other things out on the market that are like really, really heavy counterweights. And we actually found that if you get above about 3.5 to 3.75 ounces, the weight you're adding to the bat will still add MOI to the equation, even though it's moving the balance point. And if you get less than about 1.5 ounces or 1.75 ounces, you haven't made enough effective difference to the bat to really move the balance point and change the MOI. So that's why all of our VELO pucks are 2.25 ounces, because it's kind of a magic number we found to get sort of that ideal amount of MOI shift in these bats. Now, it will affect, essentially, the bigger the drop on the bat is, the more effect this is going to have, right? So if you have a drop 10 bat, you're going to see a bigger change in MOI than if you have a drop 3 bat. I also think that's a good thing, because a lot of the reasons that you need this is that kind of stopgap. Like you have a player that just jumped up into playing drop 5 bats and has to play a drop 5 bat, and the bat's a little too big for that kid. This can actually be a huge benefit to allowing that player to still get the same plate coverage, obviously follow the rules of their league, but then have more efficiency and a more effective bat swing on top of it. We've seen some other things in your studies too on puck knobs, which I think have been really cool. Increased launch angle was one I'm not sure I expected to see out of it, but I thought it was a really cool result you saw in your first study. You can talk about that one a little bit?
Yeah, and this was again, these are some kind of small initial pilot studies that we've done, but a lot of really cool, promising results. And this was one that was cool when initially, upon looking at the data with the puck knob, I thought, okay, it is what it is. Maybe a small change in exit velos and distance. And then when I dove into the data a little bit deeper, I actually realized, wow, there was a lot of balls without the puck knob that were those kind of into the ground, just the grounders that go up there and get kind of eaten up and thrown out at first. All of a sudden, when I got rid of those ones and started to look at like this, the more appropriate or the goal launch angles for this player that I was working with, all of a sudden there were many more balls in that launch angle. And then all of a sudden you start to see a nice exit velo pop and just really cool stuff with just better launch angles for what this player was trying to accomplish.
Yeah, I thought that was really neat. And then obviously we saw that reduced MOI without reducing any plate coverage by adding that puck knob. So if you have players in those kind of leagues that are just jumping up to that next level of bat, this is definitely something you can try. We've got these VELO pucks approved for use in most of the major travel leagues at this point. Working on a lot of high school leagues. We're working on collegiate leagues, but this is definitely something that's coming down the pipeline. So I would definitely check it out. And if you got some players that can benefit, it's really worth giving it a try. That's kind of the big stuff that we had to present for you today. And we wanted this to be sort of an introduction of everything we do at VELO Sports. And we're definitely interested in doing more of these as we move down the road. So, please hit us up on social media, email us. All of those different things would be great. Let us know what you want to hear about, because I mean, we have tons of data on mechanics training, on ground force, on sequencing, and we have drills and things built that are going to be releasing over time here from VELO Sports that we're really excited about on all those categories. So we're definitely going to be talking more about it. Um, at this point, I think we'd open it up if we have any other questions that are out there.
Yeah,
Tyler and I would be more than happy to answer some of those questions.
yeah,
You
we
can
had
just
a
type those in that Q&A panel, and we'll get to them. It looks like there's a first one in there.
yeah, we had a
For
good one here.
Metallic,
He asked a question about the knobs being legal in most leagues. They play the USSA tournaments. I wondered if that was something that they were legal in those tournaments.
yeah, so USSSA is fully approved. So you can use puck knobs in all USSSA events, whether it's baseball, softball, or anything else. So that is there. So um,
I
it's
think his
really cool
second
that you have our
question,
super speed slugger system. So
yeah, yeah.
believe it or not, we made that as well. Our golf company is called Super Speed Golf, and Super Speed Slugger was our first little quick venture into baseball back in like 2017. The VELO Sports system is actually, let's call it the same science. So it's exactly the same weighting structure, the same science as what we used in our super speed slugger system. We just made it, I think, a little bit more baseball friendly and a whole lot easier to use and to travel with and everything else. And we spent a few years actually redesigning the super speed slugger system to its new version here in the VELO Sports system, which we've found to be a lot more effective for players.
I will say, Mike, just to add one, because he kind of talked about how that one did not have the puck knob there, right? We have kind of played around and seen some people who really enjoyed using that puck knob as a part of some of the velo training is too, right? That can be a nice, effective way to enhance some of the training. Again, some protocols with that are kind of in the
I
works
mean, we
coming
already
down the
have a
road.
lot of that released. So, as far as the training info is all on our website at velosports.com. Just check out the info on the training protocols we've already released. There are already multiple, overspeed training programs for the system. There's also counterweight training protocols, which is what Tyler was talking about. That's kind of using the velo puck in relation and the overspeed system with its own specific drills and protocol, kind of primarily to look at bat delivery and speed through bat delivery. So check those out as well. Oh, another, do you still do events with the On Base U guys? Yeah. I mean, we're very good friends with Greg Rose and Don and the whole team at On Base U. We don't travel around to do events with them anymore. They don't do nearly as many live events as they used to. We used to be at every single one of their events as well. But yeah, they're all great friends. They're all using our equipment, and it's certainly, they've been a great asset and a great think tank to be able to toss a lot of ideas off. But yeah, I mean, I've been working with those guys for the better part of 20 years now. Tyler's also done a whole lot with On Base U and TPI as well. But yeah, very good friends of ours. All right, we got another one here. Question. I've seen former minor league player training players in baseball who uses the golf swing speed trainer. Yeah, I have seen that too. So let me say this. I wouldn't say that it would be ineffective. Overspeed training works. Like if you're going to do overspeed training, especially if you're following good protocols with it, it's going to have effect. We have seen the biggest specific impact on sport specific speed. So I would look at bat speed in baseball or swing speed in golf or serve speed in tennis. When we keep that motion relatively similar or nearly the same as what that person is doing in a game environment. So that's why I would say it is more effective for a baseball player that's trying to increase bat speed to be doing it with the baseball speed training system. It's more closely related to their actual baseball bat weight. And the motor program they're running is more connected for that player than if they're doing it in another sport. Now, that being said, if you're just looking from a training aspect to do motor unit activation, you know, to get your body explosive and reacting fast and training speed, I mean, sure, you could do that with other sport training. You could do that with some other types of exercise things in the gym. I mean, there's all kinds of ways to do that. but the sport specific piece of overspeed training has always been something that we have seen to be very effective. And Tyler, you've seen that a lot too, right? You can probably expand on some of you're in the trenches doing these studies and things. So
Yes, again, specificity of training, especially when you're trying to squeeze every bit of time out of your players who are trying to balance everything that they're doing. Specificity tends to rule out the one thing I would just say a little bit from the other side. Obviously, specificity is our goal. Um, I have had some. You mentioned you saw some of this going on. I've seen that too, and I've seen some of the rationale behind it is getting a slightly different movement pattern for different stresses on the body. Again, I think to Mike's point, obviously there's a place for it in certain situations, but man, specificity trumps all
yeah,
when it
I
comes to
think
training.
yes, we could probably split hairs here, and if we're talking about high level athletes that have been doing this training for 5 to 8 years, I think there may be some of those things could be very effective for those players. I would also say that just doing straight bat speed training with this system is like low hanging fruit. That if you haven't done it with your players, every one of them is going to gain 5, 6 miles an hour of bat speed in the first training cycle. And you'll see it over and over and over again. So like I said, it's big time low hanging fruit in the sport specific side. I'd get that going. Another question here. So, are the knobs weighted? So yes, they weigh 2.25 ounces and they add about an inch of length behind the player's hands. There's no removable weights in them. There's nothing like that. They're a specific, just solid silicone piece that fits over the bat knob. Okay. Well, I want to thank everybody for being here and spending some time with us this afternoon. This webinar will be available on our website. I believe you also get a link to it as a participant. So at this point, I'd just like to say thanks again for some time here, for your time, Tyler. We always appreciate you coming on and helping us with all the science. And for everybody else out there, thank you for spending a little time with us this afternoon. And we hope you go out there and get some more bat speed.